will you please give a warm welcome to Post Office CEO, Mr. Nick Reed.
Thanks very much, Sarge. Good morning, everybody. And particular best wishes to Sue. I thought she gave a very impassioned speech, and it's a great pity that she's not here with us. I'm delighted to see so many people in the room. I think last year we were less than 100. It looks like we've almost doubled that number, so that's a great thing. And thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here and to speak with you. Thank you to Callum for doing that. And of course, happy birthday to Callum. He's sort of sitting there at the front. I'm also very pleased to be able to stand here alongside Minister Hollinrake and obviously other colleagues as well. We don't always agree on everything. We have good policy debates and there's lots to discuss. But we do agree on something, and that is a shared determination to change the post office for the better and to support you, our postmasters and postmistresses. So before I begin reflecting on the past 12 months or so, I think it's important that I address the mistakes made in the 2021-22 remuneration scheme and our annual report and accounts. Post Office has apologised to Sir Win and to ministers for setting the inappropriate performance metric on support for the inquiry, and then subsequently awarding incentivised pay for it with the apparent approval of the inquiry as part of our wider transformation programme. There is no getting away from the fact that this was unacceptable, and on behalf of the Post Office, I'd like to apologise to you all and to all postmasters across the country. These errors should not have occurred, and it has distracted the business from the other most important areas of focus. So I want you to know that I can well understand the sense of anger that many of you will be feeling, and that more importantly still, I fully accept that you have every right to be angry. It is a matter of deep regret that this episode has detracted from the enormous amount of hard work that has taken place over recent years to change the Post Office for the better. Because that is unambiguously our determination, to transform it from an organisation which was historically focused on its own interests into a business which is entirely focused on helping you to thrive. That is not a quick nor straightforward task, and those doing that work deserve better. You deserve better. And a rapid review into the circumstances which gave rise to these mistakes is now underway. Executive pay is the responsibility of the Remuneration Committee, and accordingly, the investigation is being carried out by the new incoming chair of Post Office Remuneration. That's Amanda Burton, and we expect Amanda's work to conclude in the next 2 weeks. Amanda is a non-executive director. She joined the Post Office 15 days ago. And in parallel, the government will appoint an independent third party, an expert to assure the integrity and robustness of her investigation and its recommendations. Post Office fully accepts that there are questions that need to be answered. And these investigations will help enable that and, importantly, make recommendations for change. And I'm conscious that many people today in their questions have said they are looking for change. We will, of course, make sure the NFSP is updated on all the findings when the report is completed. In the interim, Alistair Cameron and I and the Executive Board Directors have voluntarily returned the money paid to us as a result of this mistake. The position of other eligible colleagues will be determined by the investigation. And I guess one of the reasons why I'm so frustrated by this episode is that it risks overshadowing some of the huge progress that we've made towards our intent to 2025. We want to become a sought-after, commercially sustainable business by 2025. And good progress has been made. With near universal adoption and now available on your mobile devices, many of you tell me that Branch Hub is now proving its value in making your life just that little bit easier. People wanting to run post offices, and believe me, they do exist, now benefit from an improved onboarding process which places as much emphasis on what they can expect from us as we can expect from them. And I know the NFSP has been particularly strong in seeking these changes, and we're very grateful to you for that support. Our expanded field teams are working alongside postmasters on the front line, day in, day out, and through our branch MOT pilots, helping you to make more money and reduce your costs very directly. When we said our #1 priority was improving branch profitability, we do really mean it. So the branch MOT pilot is now being placed on a program footing for more nationwide rollout. On the commercial side too, there are very strong grounds for optimism. Cash and banking continues to grow, playing a pivotal economic and social role in helping people and small businesses across the country do their banking in a world increasingly devoid of banks. I think the Minister mentioned it before, 5,500 banks have closed since 2015. We know that we have a pivotal role to play. At the moment, we have some 51 banking hubs that are going to be rolled out over the next 12 months or so. And in conversations that I've had with Link, who run the overall operation, we believe there could be anything up to 1,000 to 2,000 banking hubs. And I'm very determined that we come up with a very clear policy that postmasters are the default, particularly locally, for running banking hubs. I think it's the right thing to do. There has been unprecedented and vitally sustained demand for our so-called platform products, the holiday money and holiday insurance, our savings products, and the mortgages we offer. And again, as we talk about the change in consumer behavior and consumer habits, it is excellent that we have a diversified portfolio of products and services. And our payments business is also performing strongly, boosted by government's commitment to helping people and businesses with the eye-watering cost of energy. We know that we distributed some 13 million vouchers across the network. We know that in Northern Ireland we did 500,000 literally in the space of 10 weeks. So we are a very, very critical component, front office of government, to making sure that we can reach out to all those people who need us most. So when we stand back a little and take in the picture of the post office that you run, we know more is needed, but we also know quite rightly that as we come through the pandemic, as we come into the cost of living crisis, this front office of government, this post office that we serve and that we are the network for, is in good shape. However, our mails business, as I can hardly say, is in a difficult place. Already down following the extraordinary peaks of the pandemic, our mails business has suffered very badly from events outside of our control. You'll all remember how the parcels business fell off a map this time last year. You'll all recognise that with social mail declining somewhere in the region of 7% per annum, it is challenging. But add to that the 18 days of industrial action that went through Royal Mail, the 6 weeks of the cyber attack and the impact that had on our international business. It's been very, very difficult, and I do recognise that. To put it into context, we made £349 million from mails last year. This year, it's down to 309. So there's a distinct drop in terms of the mails income that we have relied on historically. So I think you probably understand why we recognise that this sole dependence on the Royal Mail has to stop. We know that we've got to broaden our network. We know we've got to broaden our offer, which is why we are developing partnerships with the likes of Amazon, of DPD, of DHL, and of Every, while still maintaining good relationships with our biggest partner. And a lot of people sort of say to me, how are we going to migrate away from the Royal Mail? Well, let's take a step back. We've quoted some numbers today in terms of the scale of our relationship with them. We know it is in excess of 300 million. The overall turnover of the post office last year was 915. They are a critical component to us. But be assured, as you will know from your own experiences, with different opportunities, we can expand our footprint with the other carriers, and we can mitigate some of the disintermediation that Royal Mail are doing to us, whether that's online, whether that's from a pricing perspective. It's a very, very difficult, phony war, and one that we've got to work very quickly to try and change. So we'll be sharing with you over the next couple of months some of the changes, I guess, the significant changes that we are enacting to make sure that businesses and customers can see mails in a different light, and to make sure from a distribution point of view that we genuinely become a true multi-channel and multi-carrier. So I hope that despite these market conditions and despite the rising costs and despite the current controversy, you will recognise that we are making progress. However, I'm acutely aware of the fact that if we are to succeed, we simply have to do better for you. And I've said it before, but it bears repeating. There is no post office without its postmasters and postmistresses working day in and day out in communities across the country. So while in absolute terms your remuneration has only had a modest increase this year, I acknowledge this as a percentage of revenue. It's gone the other way, the wrong way, and that's not acceptable. In the last 12 months, we've sought to help you in any way that we can. First last August, with the cost of living payments we were able to distribute, thanks largely to the online product success. It's a fact that our online sales fared far better proportionately last year than those of you on the high street. But clearly we want that to change. But at least a diversified portfolio had helped us this year, and through the August payments, helped you too directly. Then again, just last March, when we increased fees for banking and deposits by 20%, we've talked a little about that, and took a number of other positive measures thanks to the strong performance in that product set. But we rightly should be doing more, and we must do better for you. There are two preconditions to satisfy before we can make the sort of sustainable improvement in postmaster remuneration that we all absolutely recognise there is a need for. The first of these is a non-negotiable. We will not rest until each and every postmaster affected by the Horizon IT scandal has had proper redress and full and fair compensation for the suffering they have endured. This remains the #1 priority. And working closely with the Minister and his team, compensation payments have been made quickly, but not quickly enough, and there is still room for improvement. We know we need to do better, and we will do better on this front. Similarly, we must continue to support Sir Wynn's inquiry and to support it for however long it goes on, and that could be another 18 months. His work, his findings are perhaps even more important in achieving a measure of justice for those affected by the events under scrutiny than a compensation payment alone could ever be. It is critical that the lessons from this awful period of the Post Office's long, long history are properly drawn and absorbed so that people can be confident that we can move forward into the future with confidence. No one should then doubt our commitment to meeting the requirements of this first precondition. Because, and I repeat, we will not rest until we've done so, and we are unlikely to be able to truly move on until Sir Wynn's findings are published and the recommendations implemented. So let me turn to the second precondition. While giving 100% to resolving the past, we also have to somehow find another 100% to helping you keep the show on the road, to help you open your doors for the millions of people who rely on you each and every day, develop new products and services you need to attract a new generation of customers, to design, to build and deploy a new IT system to replace Horizon, culminating in the biggest IT rollout in this country's history, to keep to our contract with government to maintain 11,500 post offices nationwide, according to specific access criteria at all times, and to keep paying our bills as a company which, like all of yours, is facing spiralling costs at every turn. And in doing so, being relentless in taking operational cost out of the business. Now, it will not have escaped your attention that, try as one might, it's impossible to do 100% more of anything without considerable additional resource. Our finances will simply not stretch to do everything we have to do, let alone all the things we want to do. It's not a complaint, it's not a criticism, but it is a fact. So the second precondition is the difficult discussions we have with government about how they can help us to square that circle and to succeed, and succeed soon. But I'm optimistic about this. Why? Well, having worked with Minister Hollinrake for a number of months now, and as I've said at the beginning, no one could doubt his commitment to the Post Office, and to postmasters, and to all they stand for. And so, while I absolutely understand the difficulties involved and the many competing priorities in government, 400 billion spent through COVID, I do remain optimistic that we will find the right way through. But I also remain of the view that in the longer term, we'll need to think more creatively about the model on which this organisation is currently built. To be truly sustainable, we will need to find a way to evolve the rather tired and unpredictable cycle of post office bidding for government investment every 3 years or so. Set aside differing priorities that the government might have at any given time, we've also seen in the last 2 years how rapidly external factors can shape the economic environment, and often for the worse. But I think we'll also need to find ways to make our ambition of a genuine partnership between the company and its postmasters a reality, which goes well beyond warm words alone. It is now 3 years, I think, since I first raised the possibility of moving towards some form of mutualisation or other profit-sharing arrangement between Post Office and its postmasters. And I remember at the time, concern was expressed in some quarters that I might be somehow going too far. So it was encouraging to hear Minister Hollingreight recently, and again this morning, respond positively to a parliamentary colleague, which the good gentleman over there mentioned as well, indicating that nothing should be off the table in this regard. The recent developments at Royal Mail, which would see the first 20% of their profits shared with their employees, will also nudge this debate in the right direction. So while this is ultimately a matter for government, I continue to personally believe that some form of structural realignment might breathe important new confidence, as well as commercial sustainability, into our business. So let me conclude by saying just a couple of things. I understand that we need to do better by you. I hear clearly that we must find ways to make this business work better for you so that you can see a proper return for the unquestionable effort you give in your communities. And I genuinely think we can begin to shift up a gear and make that a reality. You might think, why? Because our network, or rather your network, is an immensely valuable thing to this country. We often talk about the front office of government. We often talk about how we are physically on the high street. I think in the last 3 years, as we've emerged through the pandemic, as we've gone through the cost of living crisis, that sense of purpose could not be more importantly reinforced. We are valuable to government, as we're seeing through cash and banking, but also making the rapid and secure distribution of funds to those who need it possible. Show me another organisation capable of supporting energy, companies, consumers, and the government in the way that we have. We're also valuable to major companies, including major companies in the mails and logistics market, who may soon question why on earth they would operate their own, or indeed any other physical retail access points, when they have access to 11,500 in the network. And because if we can demonstrate, as we have, that this business can make a profit, even in the face of some pretty extraordinary challenges, it can positively thrive in more benign economic conditions. So this root and branch overhaul of the company, and make no mistake, that's exactly what it is a hard day in, day out activity, and I know that. But we must see it through to give the business and all of yours a proper and fair basis from which to grow. We do recognise that there are too many costs in the centre. We've set ourselves a challenge to remove those by £40 million over the next 2 years, and we will continue to drive down cost. We're moving offices. We're reducing from 55,000 square foot to 17,000 square foot. That'll drive £2.5 million a year's worth of saving. We're getting out of Swindon. We're selling our businesses up in Manchester, in terms of the sites in Manchester, to try and recoup and lower our cost base. And that's very, very important, because ultimately you can do two things. You either take out central costs or you drive top-line revenue. And we've struggled. Let's be very, very clear. We've struggled over the last 11, 12 years to drive top-line revenue. Interestingly enough, £915 million this year was considerably more than we did last year or the year before. But what we are seeing, and as a consequence of the cost of living crisis, our desire to change our IT system, the support for the inquiry, the support for compensation, central costs are going up. There's no question that the next 18 months is going to be very, very difficult. However, we will get through the public inquiry. We will implement those recommendations. We will change the IT system that we have. And more importantly, by moving off Horizon and moving on to MBIT, We will lower our operating costs by some 60%. We'll be able to bring products and services to market that much more quickly, and it'll improve your operating costs as well in your business. I'm very clear that automation and new underlying IT systems and the way that we work with postmasters to ensure that they land is critical for you to lower your cost base and for us to be able to get more products and services to market. I'll end there, but I'm very, very happy to take questions. Thank you very much for listening, and it's a pleasure to be at the NFSP conference.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. And you take some questions.
Yep, of course.
I'm going to ask you first question myself.
Yep, of course, Hodge.
Banking hub is something that you've just mentioned.
Yes.
Hub is not going to help us in here because it's going to be another opposition to us. You know, I'm asking this question now because I didn't realize they're opening new outlets. That's taking business away from us. So please rethink on that.
Okay.
Because, and the minister, that is going to be an opposition, nail in our coffin. Because that's not going to help individual sub-postmasters. You're creating another opening, an online service that's killing our business. That's going to be a new outlet. We were led to believe that the banking hub would help each sub-postmaster. But you are creating new outlets.
Okay, couple of thoughts on that. As I said in my speech, we've got currently 6 banking hubs. I think there are open across the country, and there will be some 50 by the end of this financial year. The most important thing is that local sub-postmasters are the first people to have the opportunity to run these banking hubs. Banking hubs won't open anywhere where there isn't a demand for them. And of course, we don't determine what that demand is. But with 5,500 banking branches closing, with somewhere in the region of 2 million customers who are unbanked, and with 8 million individuals using cash on a regular basis, we feel there is a void there that if we don't fill it, who is going to fill it? And it's really important for me that the post office and sub-postmasters have the opportunity to fill that gap. If we don't fill it, others will, and then we won't have any business at all. So this is a classic case of the market is moving on. Banks are being allowed to close, and one might argue, and one does argue from a legislative point of view, that isn't appropriate. But there is a gap, and there's an opportunity, and there are postmasters out there who want to run banking hubs. Currently, we as the post office have first run at this. What mustn't happen is that this opportunity is taken away from us as the post office and given to others. And I'm really clear, and I've spoken to a number of you around there who've written to me and said, I'm local, I understand the local businesses, I understand local customers. Give me the opportunity to run that post office. And with my team down here, we've heard that. We're not cloth-eared. We've absolutely heard that. And we've said, let's make sure that those postmasters in the room who want to run those banking hubs, they're the individuals who do that. I absolutely get your point, but this is a broader question. It's a broader question about proximity as well. I know we talk a lot about proximity, and I'm looking at Harry and others. You know, this is something that I've managed all my career, is that the notion that somehow other people are going to eat my lunch and I'm not going to allow them to do that. We've got a real opportunity here to plug a gap. Let's make sure it's the post office that plugs that gap. And that's something I think is really, really important for us.
Thank you. Right,
we can all differ on this, Sarge. We can all differ on this.
Right, we're managing I think about 3 or 4 questions because
I'm hanging around, yeah.
Hanging around, yeah, all right.
Andrew Purdy. I have a community post office in Great Ryborough in North Norfolk. Under a previous regime, the ethos of the Post Office Limited was divide and rule. Those of us taking up post office contracts were told there was only one contract, take it or leave it. Whereas in reality, Post Office Limited set contracts based on paying as little as they thought they could get away with in each case. The result is a big variation in the levels of remuneration, with some postmasters being paid much less than others for the same level of sales, with the post office branch often being subsidised by other elements of the postmaster's business. What are Post Office Limited doing to ensure that the playing field is level and that postmasters with the same level of sales get the same level of remuneration, so that we don't have private businesses subsidising this essential part of national infrastructure?
It's a really good question. How would I start? My understanding is we have 59 different contracts out there in the estate. And I have to say that one of the great challenges that I've got is how do we come up with a model, and I think it's very difficult to look at all of those 59 contracts and come up with some commonality without doing a full and wholesome piece of work right the way across the piece, which we will do as a consequence of moving off of Horizon and onto MBIT. That's part of the process that we've got to refine the contracts. You might say, how did we get to a position where 59 different contracts exist across the estate? And I asked myself a similar question, and as I understand it, and many of you in the room will be much more familiar with this than I am, this was a consequence of network transformation. It was a consequence of how can we get as many people through network transformation, and so therefore there were variabilities across the contract. And I think, to your point, in this new world, we want to make sure we're utterly transparent with the relationship that we have with postmasters, in the sense that it's got to be a partnership. And I'm very, very clear, and I've said it, and I will stand by that. The partnership relationship, any great organisation knows damn well that the sum of the parts has got to be more than the individual elements, and we have to form a partnership to be bigger than that. So what's my commitment? Are we going to have a full-scale, end-to-end review of all the contracts? Well, we're in that at the moment, and one of the things that came out of 2019, as you'll recall, is that there were a set of recommendations that came on the back of the GLO, and we wanted to make sure that we reset without recontracting with everybody, but we reset the contracts, which is exactly what we did in order to try and get a degree of a level playing field. That work is only halfway through, so I do hear you loud and clear. We are looking at it as we go through the MBIT process. Can we use that to simplify and rebuild the relationship? And of course, the NFSP will be utterly crucial to that process, because you are the representatives, and we will make sure we take you on that journey. More importantly, we'll go on that journey together.
Next question.
Hi, Nick. On Thursday, I drove 3.5 hours to come and hear you in Glasgow. And because dinner was late, it was 3.5 hours drive, so I had to get back at 1 o'clock in the morning to get to work the next day. So I took the opportunity today to ask you this same question. In your speech on Thursday, you intimated that profits coming from post office, the majority of the profit is coming from not from the post offices, but other ways. So like what's happened with mails, when we are getting acceptance rather than a label,
yeah.
Is the profit that we are getting through our remuneration coming just from the counter productions, or are we getting it all? So it just reverts back to what we've all been talking about today, is the importance of mutualisation. For us to get to grow our business, we need to be mutual to enhancing the profits that you did say on Tuesday and Thursday, that it is now bringing bigger profits than on the counter. Thank you.
Again, the Minister's made the comment about mutualisation. I did it 3 years ago. I do think that there is a number of different structural models that we need to look at and to think about. I think that debate is open, and I think that's a debate that we need to have. On the specifics, don't get me wrong, you know, we delivered £48 million worth of profit this year. That's an unaudited number, so don't quote me on it until obviously the auditors have done it. What was very striking about that number was the huge contribution that we got from our platform products. No question about that. The travel business has been a fantastic success. Example, 2019, I think we had 23% of the retail travel foreign exchange business. We now have in excess of 30. We stuck at it and we delivered against it, and that's generating a great deal of profit. One of the things that we've managed to do is to bundle. So we've got foreign exchange, we've got insurance, we've got international driving licenses, we've got passports, and we're building a sort of, I guess, a package, for want of a better word, which, given what is going on out in the marketplace, huge amounts of customers are still wanting to go on holiday. They don't want to buy goods and services, they want to have experiences, they want to go on holiday. So that has served us really well, and I think we dug in during the pandemic when others got out of the market, and that's been great. And we've been able to share some of that profitability with you. We've also had 13 interest rate rises over the last 18 months, and we have a very, very strong online savings and mortgages and loans business, as you'll be well aware. And again, for those of you familiar with it, it's called net interest margin, the difference between a saving and a loan or a saving and a mortgage. That has allowed us to derive really very, very strong and powerful profits, which of course, again, has delivered for us. I think it's £126 million worth of revenue from our platform products alone. So it is important that we have a diversified portfolio. So it's not just what's going on in the high street, but it's also what's going on online. And the Minister mentioned it, I mentioned it. I think 1.5 million customers online go online with us on a weekly basis. There is a future there, and I recognise that, and we've got to exploit that, but we've got to make sure that we share the profits more evenly in terms of what is going on. We all know that we've got more work to do from a banking perspective and from a mails perspective. Yeah, the mails business, I think it's 54% of every mails transaction you get. The banking is considerably less, it's about 30%. And we've got to try and find a way to make sure that you are remunerated and rewarded appropriately. Now, I know that Martin's going to jump up and speak in a moment. He and I have talked about this a great deal, which is what is and how are we going to do the back office assessment of what you're doing that's out of sight, that's not being included, that's not being remunerated, and that's not being paid for. So we're going to do a 16-week study with, I think it's about 20 branches, but Martin will get into the detail of this a little later, so that we genuinely understand from a time and motion perspective what is going on, hasn't been done since 2014, what is going on in the back office, what is going on behind the scenes, what are the expectations, whether they're regulatory, whether they're post office, whether they're ourselves, whether it's just a change in the business mix that's driving the activity that's going on in post offices. We want to do that, we want to see it transparently, and then we can work together with the NFSP and with others to say, how do we address this and what does that look like? Do we automate things? Do we pay for things? Do we stop doing things? And let's be clear, we want to try and simplify the organisation. At the moment, it is extraordinarily complex, and that's something that we've got to get away from. Now, complexity comes with being a government-owned organisation. That's just part and parcel with that type of ownership model. And again, I keep looking at Harry, because Harry and I are at NISA together, so we know each other well, and we understand what we're trying to do, which is how do we simplify this organisation, which then does two things. It reduces costs, and more importantly, it brings transparency, because you can see what's going on. And I'm acutely conscious that what goes on in the back office remains slightly hidden, certainly from me and from others, and that's what we're going to try and address as we go through the summer.
Hi, Nick.
Hello.
Thanks. My name is Jeevan. I'm from St. Margaret Post Office in London region. Nick, you've been talking about remuneration increase for the last 3 years. That need to be fair. But are you aware of it? Currently, there are more postmasters out there who can't afford to hire a staff due to the modern day of slavery is keeping us earning a living and our retailers to pay to run the post office. And when that remuneration is going to change, and what is your assurance those who are invested, like me, who invested into a business with the government, our investment into the business now doesn't value any value onto that. So when are you going to change the remunerations?
Well, I do understand that, and we obviously had two interventions this year, one in August, where we tried to make a straight cash investment for somewhere in the region of 6 or 7%, and then again in March, where obviously we did the banking changes and we added those to the Royal Mail changes as well. When I look at the remuneration that was paid in the last financial year, it was 399 million in total. I think it was just over 2% up. Now, that isn't good enough because we recognise the cost of living is far in excess of that. But you've heard the Minister speak, you've heard my comments as well, and you'll hear from Martin in a moment. We recognise that isn't the case, that isn't an acceptable way forward, and that's something that we want to address. There will be an easing in economic conditions. I'm fairly certain of that over the coming weeks and months, but that still isn't forgivable. We've got to get to a position where your core business, which, let's be honest, is mails and parcels, will improve and increase. We still need to drive that business with the Royal Mail, so we want to get back from 309 back up to 350, and then at the same time we want to continue to develop the DHL, the Every, and the other types of businesses as well, so that we actually have, a very, very robust business. I think that is possible. you know, the trouble with having a partner that is in utter chaos, which they are at the moment, is that it isn't entirely reliable. I don't know what brand damage has genuinely been done by customers or for customers by the Royal Mail activities over the last 6 to 9 months. I sincerely hope it's not long term. We'll have all seen that the government are going to look a little bit more closely at the USO, they're going to look a little bit more closely at the Royal Mail's performance, and they're going to put them under a bit more pressure, which I think will be of benefit to us. And I think that will be an important thing in terms of driving confidence in Royal Mail, not just for our customers, but for us as well. So that is something that is going to be hugely important. But you've heard the commitment from us. We will be looking at remuneration, particularly back office. But as I say, we know that the best ways to do this are threefold. One, we've got to drive the top line, and we've got to look at new products and services, and we'll be working with government to make sure that we can find those. Two, we've got to take cost out of the business, out of the centre. That drives our overall profitability, more to share with you. And you know, three, from our perspective, is we've got to look at the activities we are expecting and asking of you, and make sure that we all understand what it is, and if there are ways that we can automate, ways that we can make efficient, ways that we can stop, or more importantly, ways that we can pay, then we'll do that too.
Yeah.
Hi, Nick. I'm from Kent, East Peckham Post Office. My question is, again, it's remuneration. So I took over the post office in 2017, November. After 4 months, I realized that my remuneration wasn't paid enough. So after having continuous conversation with your HR department, and they found out that I've been paid $3,500 shortfall of the remuneration in November till January. So it took almost 2 years to get that remuneration back to me. So how can we get confidence the way remuneration being generated is justified, you know, like we're getting the right amount? Because they said there was a problem on the system or something. I don't know what was the problem at your end. And they gave me the money in 2019 August, which was I should have got in November. That time it wasn't. I'm new in the business. I needed money, but that money I got after 2 years.
Well, I can't comment on the specifics. Obviously, it was some time ago. But let me make a note of it. Let me find out and understand whether that's a more systemic issue and whether that's something that's going on more broadly. I haven't heard of that kind of an issue, but I'm looking at the team. We'll come back to you and we'll try and understand what happened and why it happened, and more importantly, making sure that it hasn't happened elsewhere. That's all I can say.
Ying, one more question.
My name is Ying from Keitron Post Office, Surrey, Southeast region. I appreciate Post Office try your best to help us. I would like to know, what is Post Office clear vision, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years plan to protect us, support us, lead us to the future?
Very good. I mean, I think as I've tried to sort of say before, I think there are 4 very, very core products that we have to continue to develop and to drive. I've talked about mails and parcels, and we'll be coming back to you within the next 2 months to talk about what the next stage of the mails and parcels journey is in terms of how we will become the sort of physical hub for distributors, for retailers, for Royal Mail, and of course for the other major players. So I think the mails and parcels business is utterly critical. From a cash and banking perspective, I think there is a huge opportunity. I know that we've had a slightly controversial conversation around banking hubs. I still think that is the future for us, and we need to work out how best to execute against it. I think it's really, really, really important. And I think we're going to have to start thinking about, from a financial services perspective and a broader banking perspective, what our role is. And I appreciate that comes with lots of complexity. The Minister mentioned before some of the challenges we've got with limits from a deposit limits perspective, from a money laundering perspective. We've got some work to do in that space, but I genuinely think that as a trusted brand, we have a great role to play. So I think it's important. And we've got to battle some of those. Those are security issues, AML issues, you know those things. I mentioned travel. That's the third sort of pillar of our strategy, as it was when I joined in 2019. I'm very, very clear that we have a unique position with the travel money card, with our foreign exchange, with what we do from travel insurance. Fantastic travel insurance, proved itself throughout the COVID and beyond. But also we've got to try and work with government as well around passports and international driving licenses and making sure we don't lose those businesses, because there is a government drive, quite rightly, digital, go online, but actually that is limiting things for different customers, for our customers ultimately. So we've got more work to do there. And probably the fourth area, which I suspect that when I joined the business in 2019, I didn't think had the legs that it clearly has had, which is our payments business, which is our vouchers business, which is what we do with energy business relief, which is what we do in terms of the vouchers that we provide for a vast array of customers, 13 million since this time last year. Is an extraordinary footfall driver. Now, I know people get a little bit tense when I use the word footfall driver, but we've got to work out that we want to drive people into our post offices so that they can be cross-sold to, and they can be upsold to, and they can look at other opportunities that we may have. So those four areas remain the core part of our business, and they are the core part of our business. What we need to do is to add on the additives on the other side. So what other products and services are we doing? You know, are we looking at what's happening in the pharmacy industry? We should be, and we will be, in terms of what is going on from a physical high street perspective, and that's something I think we will look at. What are we looking around digital identity? That's another really, really core part of an opportunity for us, both physically as well as online. So looking at new products and services is crucial. The second major point is, how do we simplify our business? And at the root of this, absolutely at the root of this, is getting off Horizon, is getting onto a system that is 60% cheaper, that is much, much quicker to bring products and services to market, that will make your operating costs lower, but it will be challenging over the next 18 months. So that's key. And I've said it before, and I said it at the very start, what was a public inquiry started as a 4-month independent inquiry 2.5 years ago. That was wrong, and it was poorly positioned, and it was wrong. It's now a public inquiry. Sir Win has extended it 3 times so far, so we don't yet know how long it's going to take, and we've had the conversation around that is expensive. That is expensive for us to run. There are 2 expressions, 2 legal expressions around the public inquiry that are interesting, which are, we, as Post Office, have to do everything that is reasonable and proportionate to support the inquiry. Personally, I don't think that's enough. I think we should be going above and beyond in order to support the inquiry. And that takes time, it takes resource, and it takes people. But we owe it to your colleagues and your previous colleagues to make sure that we get this right. So I do expect and anticipate there will be anything up to 18 more months of the public inquiry. And being candid, the next 6-9 months will be very, very difficult for Post Office. Lots of people in the Post Office will be called forward, people in this room, colleagues of mine, and that's going to be dislocating for the day-to-day operation of the business, and we've got to work out how we do that. There will then be a series of recommendations, quite rightly, that Sir Win will come up with to ensure that nothing like this can happen again, and that will take time to implement, no question about that. So that has to remain the most important part of it. But I'm acutely conscious that we're trying to balance this across the piece. Compensation, the inquiry, transformation of our underlying systems, looking out for you, making sure we have a network that is fit for purpose for customer demand. And then more importantly, structurally, how do we as an organisation operate? And I think that's an open debate. I think the NFSP will be right at the heart of it. And I very much hope you as colleagues will be too. Thank you.
Thank you.